a short video. Excuse me. I often say that they're going to be short, but this one will be. And it concerns the index of evidence. And better put up the first slide. Good idea, Dermot. So what are we going to talk about today? This is about the index of evidence and an attempt to familiarize you with the index of evidence and basically give you a prompt to start recording your evidence. This covers both the first years of the postgraduate DIP and the BA in social work apprenticeship program. There are some slight differences, but you will be both keeping an index and you'll be both keeping that throughout your course. So you've done a learning opportunities section of your mentoring CLE agreements, or at least you'll be working up to that. So the learning opportunities is essentially the plan of what you are going to do. And the index of evidence is showing that the plan has progressed. Quite simple, really. You'll start to gather evidence from the start of the program, and you will continue to do that for the next 2 or 3 years. So it's a constant task and activity. And so if you establish good habits in the first year, this will make it easier to track your progress overall and will also make your own life easier. There is nothing worse than the anxiety of lastminute.com. So if you get used to doing it on a regular basis, life will be much easier. We also have to ensure the evidence stands up to internal or external scrutiny. So internally, there are various quality assurance processes that go on and that need to be paid attention to. Sorry, somebody rang me. I'm not going to redo the recording. I'm going to continue on. So there's quality assurance processes within the department, within the university, in a kind of wider context, etc. So if somebody else came along and had a look and didn't know anything about it, you would kind of go, oh yes, the evidence is here. There's also some external scrutiny, things like external examiners, which routinely kind of have a look at our course materials, and of course the inspectorate, which in this instance might be Ofsted. So we want to make sure that this is standalone, and anybody who looks at it, they can be in no doubt that the evidence of your capability is there. It's a record of all the relevant activities the apprentice undertakes. Now that can include things that you are confirming that you can do, particularly at the start of your course. You may be seeing what are routine activities in a new way because of the discussions you've had in class on things of this nature. It will be aligned against the appropriate professional standards, surprise, surprise. In the first semester, we only really look at the PCF. That's an attempt to get people to become familiar with that. But in the second term, which for the BAs will be a continuation of their first year, and for the postgrad dippers will be contrasting learning experience, we bring in the Skills England apprenticeship standards. Now we have ways of helping you understand how those two things work together, and I will come back to that point a little later in the presentation. But this is what it looks like. May as well have a look at the document. Top templates like this. You can see there's actually quite a bit of guidance, but I'll try to summarize what you're looking at right there. So first of all, it is collaborative. It is your responsibility to keep the index up to date, but the mentors and indeed university tutors and SRAs will periodically have a look at this. And in actual fact, every so often they have to sign it off. And we'll come back to signing in a little bit. At the start of the course, in the early days, some of it will be about consolidation for you. It won't be entirely new learning, as I said before, but you'll perhaps see it in a different frame, if you see what I mean. The quality of the evidence is really, really important. You do not, for example, have to include every single phone call you ever make. So quantity, at the same time, I don't want to see just 3 pieces of evidence. That's not really doing it, is it? Because there are 9 PCF domains and they should be covered at least once. I'd probably like to see 2 or 3 pieces of evidence for each one. So I don't like to get into the numbers game. and would like to emphasize the quality is very, very important here. But that doesn't exclude the idea that there should be a reasonably decent quantity of evidence there also. Be extremely scrupulous about GDPR. I know you will hear this message in many different places. You'll hear it in work, in the university, and so on. Do not use PLE names. It's preferable to actually use one initial instead of two, but that wouldn't be the end of the world. And definitely do not include things like case numbers from your IT systems or other identifiers like email addresses and things of that nature. Try to avoid PCF 1 to 9. Sometimes people think, oh, this activity covers all the PCFs. And sometimes that'll be true, but not always. So use that sparingly, would be my suggestion. So what you should aim for is to try to find where the strongest links between the activity and the PCF are. So there might be quite strong links to say 3 or 4 of the PCFs, and that's the kind of thing you're aiming for overall. There are standard abbreviations. Here's just a couple, but don't limit yourself to that. You can actually invent your own ones. And after a while, you might have 30, 40 items on your index of evidence. So how am I going to distinguish between the various supervision sessions that took place? Obviously, you're going to number them because other people are going to use that index to make an assessment of your overall progress on the job learning. And it's kind of helpful if we can actually identify exactly what piece of evidence you're talking about in your written work, in your assessments, in your reviews, and so on and so forth. So just get into the habit of numbering them, if you wouldn't mind. So it's a little thought about how you're going to record this. So we made a very simple change to this. So first of all, you have what you did, what the activity was, and that could be, I don't know, meeting a person, it could be doing an assessment, it might even be a reflection that you've had individually or in supervision, whatever it happens to be. So you don't need to give a big, long description of that because the evidence of that is probably elsewhere. And the idea of an index is it points you in the direction of where fuller evidence is available. So brief description of what I did, and then a little bit more attention paid to what I learned, because that's the real value in these things. Quite often when you have outlined your learning opportunities, you think, well, this is probably what I'll learn. And then it turns out it was something entirely different. Learning is variable like that, isn't it? Kind of sometimes quite unpredictable. That's okay, not a problem. But do tell me a little bit about what you actually learned. You felt like it, but you might do different the next time. Now, as I said, at various different times, because there's a lot of these documents and there's different circumstances, I am not going to go through them all, but we do require signatures. That might be the university tutor. It might be the SRA, it might be the mentor, it might be the on-site supervisor at different times in the course. But when that person signs that document, they're validating that it is a truthful record of your progress and activities that actually happened in the real world. So there's kind of an important little bit of context there, you know. It's kind of like a print of approval, if you will. So there is a kind of perhaps quasi-legal element to that signature. It's not to be entirely ignored. Now, again, there is a whole other presentation, again, fairly short, on the professional standards that are relevant to the course. Now, what used to be called the IATE standards are now called Skills England Social Work Apprenticeship Standards. They did a little bit of a rebranding exercise. The standards are fundamentally the same. Now, we use the PCF as the baseline standard because it has levels of progression. The other standards, including social working and professional standards, do not have that. That's a little bit problematic when you're designing a learning course. So the PCF gives us those levels of progression, and then we mapped it against the Skills England standards, mainly because there wasn't a nationally available mapping document that did that, even though I did ask PASWA, but nothing seems to have happened about that. So it may not be perfect, but our mapping document is the best thing that is available at the present moment in time. So if you have any feedback about that, we might learn something from you. But really the point here is that it takes a while to get used to all these professional standards, what they mean, how they map against each other. But you become more familiar with these things as the course progresses, and we have some tools and guidance that would help you with that. Summary: gather evidence throughout the course. You do learning opportunities to plan for your learning. The index of evidence shows what you did learn. Never include any original documents. Remember, the index is pointing to those documents. Do not include case notes, supervision notes, definitely not case notes, or anything of that nature in any portfolio you submit to the university. The signing indicates that the mentor, SRA, university tutor, on-site supervisor, whoever it happens to be, is validating the truthfulness of that document. So that's not an insignificant thing to do in some ways. There is a template, obviously, and a list of abbreviations. Please, when using abbreviations, number them. And on occasion, you may have to invent your own abbreviation, which is absolutely and totally fine. We start by mapping against the PCF. As I said earlier, PCF has the advantage of having levels of progression. And at the start of everybody's course, it is always the readiness for practice level of the PCF. We bring in the Skills England apprenticeship standards from January in your first year of study. And as I said already, we'll give you guidance about that and kind of show you how you map one against the other. There are no set number of pieces of evidence, but as I say, if I see 3 or 4 or even 10, it's not making me ecstatically happy. You're trying to show here several different pieces of evidence of your capacity in different domains. So actually what happens in the course is people get more used to doing this over time, more used to recording it on a regular basis. And by the time they come to their final year, these documents are actually quite extensive. Any questions? Obviously ask the module lead. You can ask the lead for on-the-job learning. But a little hint and tip that you might consider. If you have an opportunity to ask these things in class, when the whole group is there, when your peers and colleagues are there, as a distinct advantage. You're probably not the only person to have that question, but you might be the only person to ask it. So when you ask that question, you're doing everybody else a favor. You're engaging in collaborative learning, and it may be that several other people will benefit from any discussion that results from a question in a way that might not happen if it's just one-to-one. Nothing wrong with one-to-one, but if you can ask a more general fora, please do. So I think that is actually quite enough for this presentation. Thank you very much for your time and your patience in listening to it. And I am going to stop that recording now. And I hope you have a nice day. See you later. Bye.